Just a second. Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So, welcome to another episode of New Zealand Salesforce Podcast. So today I have a very special guest on my show, who's a senior functional consultant, Kin Onn. So we'll be talking about functional consulting side of things on Salesforce side and what it means to be a Salesforce functional consultant. It's a casual chat. I mean, Kin Onn, you're welcome to grab a beer if you want. The only one clause is no swearing. Yeah. So welcome to my show, Kin Onn. So happy to have you today.
Thanks,
so
Vikas. Happy to be here.
You're welcome, man. So can you tell me about yourself? You know, how many years of Salesforce experience you have and things you do in a nutshell?
Yeah. Well, I entered the Salesforce world about 2 years ago, right near the same time when I started working in New Zealand. But before that, I have about like 10 over years in the ERP consulting world. So I was a consultant for an ERP product. For those who don't know, ERP is just a fancy name for a finance and accounting system that that we install for companies. So I started work in New Zealand, and the company wanted me to pick up the Salesforce product. So I said, yeah, okay. So as with everyone, I started learning on Trailhead, and the more I mean, it was pretty rough at first because there's a lot to learn, right? Even though I'm familiar with systems in general, but when you started learning Salesforce, it can be quite overwhelming. But luckily, Trailhead uh, makes it easy for people to pick up, and then it will show you step by step about what you need to do to produce certain results. So then, yeah. So after a couple months of learning, uh, I I was put on a project to implement a third-party app on the Salesforce platform. And then, after 2 years, I have about well, modestly two Salesforce certificates, working on my third one, and 150 badges. So yeah.
That's exciting. Thank you very much for that. I believe that the projects you're in would have given you a lot of experience on the Salesforce side. So I presume you always worked as a functional consultant, right?
Yeah. Before I started Salesforce, I was a functional consultant. Implementing this ERP system. So it's not really a big leap for me to move from that to Salesforce, because Salesforce is just another system that I have to be familiar with, and the system and the third party app that I was implementing on Salesforce is also another ERP. So there are similarities. It's just that I have to uh, get used to the Salesforce platform as it is, and 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 be aware that everything is done on cloud, because I'm from the old school system, which is implementing it on premise
Yeah,
before the cloud. So if you're doing on Salesforce, it's all on the cloud, which makes things essentially quite a lot easier.
that's cool. Yeah, that's right. So can you tell me what is the role of a functional consultant? I mean, from a Salesforce perspective. I mean, because people might be listening and thinking, "Oh, yeah, we're talking about functional consultants, but what
Mm.
is functional consultant is all about?"
Yeah, I mean, functional consultants have I would say identical roles, whether you're in Salesforce or otherwise. So if you're a Salesforce function consultant, most likely that you'll be dealing with the customers and the users. First of all, you'll be gathering their requirements and trying to understand that, and then translating that into the Salesforce environment, that is mapping their requirements to what you need to configure on Salesforce or customize on Salesforce to fulfill the requirements. That will involve meeting the users, going back and forth, and then at the end of the day, once everything has been approved, writing the solution design. So once you have the solution design, you start on what we call the build. That's essentially configuring the Salesforce system or the third-party app to make sure that it works as per the solution design that you have written. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So beyond that, then we go through what we call this cycle of testing. So you work with the users or the customers to make sure that everything works as intended. Because along the way, when you're talking to users, sometimes you may misunderstand their requirements, or it doesn't quite turn out the way that they expected. So that has to be ironed out during the implementation, what we call the implementation lifecycle. And then from there, just make sure that um, everything works well at the go live date, and then along the way you support them afterwards, or support the users afterwards. Yeah, so there's a lot of roles or hats that you have to wear as a functional consultant.
Oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's good to know. And do you have to know pre-sale skills as well?
Um, Partially, I suppose, because it depends on what are you or what the company expects you to do. Because pre-sales is a specialized skill. Yeah, I mean, I have done pre-sales before. Usually, pre-sales is actually a different topic, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen functional consultants doing pre-sales, and sometimes they don't do well in presenting the system. Yeah, because it's not in pre-sales. It's not just showing the functionalities or just listing the features and functions of the system. It is actually selling them the system, right? So it's more of a sales activity than a consulting
Right.
consulting
Right.
activity. Yeah, so it's a totally different mindset.
All right. Okay. Cool.
Uh,
Yeah, I just wanted to put it out there so that someone listening to us today might think, oh yeah, do you have to know pre-sales? Because I've seen job advert right in New Zealand. Sometimes they expect people to know pre-sales, so that's
it,
that's one of the reasons why I asked.
it can be taught, and also depends on your interest and personality as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's a learned skill, but yeah, I mean, if you go into it knowing that it's a different mindset and a different skill, then you just need to switch your mind to that, um, yeah, to that way of thinking. I'm just saying, like, don't expect someone senior or senior functional consultant to be good in pre-sales immediately just because he or she knows the product well.
yeah. I understand that. That's good to know. That's good to know. Cool. Thank you very much for that. Another question I wanted to ask that do you have to have an IT background to become a Salesforce functional consultant? The reason why I'm asking, right? Today, say for instance, a school teacher might be listening to us, who's teaching, say, liberal arts. I'm wondering, oh, Salesforce seems very exciting. Can I become a functional consultant? Do you need to know a IT concept, or can someone say a banker can become a functional consultant, or say, oh, let me put it in a very simple way. I'm an accountant, right? I'm an accountant, so I wanted to explore Salesforce consulting space. So is that something it's possible, or do you have to go and take an IT course, or I mean the transition? Um,
Well, sure, of course, it's possible. The caveat is how much work you want to put into it. First of all, I'm from an accounting background, so I'm definitely not from IT, right?
yeah,
But even though you don't need, I hate to use the word but if even though you don't need an IT background, you do need an interest in IT. Yeah.
right.
And I don't mean like hardcore IT, like knowing programming syntax or whatever, but on a general sense, just be comfortable and curious about how IT works in general. Because if you're on Trailhead and on Salesforce, you definitely come across some terms or concepts that you have to know, right? If you get bored or turned off by those concepts, like for example, in Trailhead, Salesforce explains how their cloud infrastructure works, right? So that's essentially knowing how Salesforce works. Then there needs to be some sort of interest in knowing that, and along the way you come up with like integration that you need to, I mean, we don't expect functional consultants to create integration APIs, but
Yeah,
there needs to be understanding of what an API is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's
so
right.
those are the overall IT concepts surrounding the platform that you will encounter. Yeah. So it's good if you're comfortable uh with or curious in knowing that. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. That's good to know. I mean, it will help people out there who's listening to us, right, who wanted to make a transition to Salesforce. I mean, it will help them, right, to have that a little bit of IT mindset, just to understand, what it mean by cloud computing, and I mean, like you said, they don't have to know API programming, right? But at least if they understand what API means, so that's a good starting point. Cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and do you have any favorite Salesforce feature? Like something you're very passionate about, like like for instance, process builder or flows or.
Yeah, I think the latest version or iteration of Flow is very powerful,
Oh yeah,
and it's quite easy to use as well. I mean, for a relative non-coder like me, right? So with Flow, you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, if you compare Salesforce to what I was doing earlier, the earlier system or the my previous ERP system that was working on,
yeah,
it was quite rigid, right? So if users have requirements that the system can't meet out of the box, it takes a lot of effort to customize, right? I think right? I mean, we were talking about Unit 4
yeah,
ERP. I mean, that's what you and I have been working on before we were in Salesforce.
yeah.
It takes a lot of programming knowledge to customize the system to meet the user's requirements. But in Salesforce, I think about 80 to 90% of the requirements, I dare say, can be met by flow, depending on whether you want to do a simple flow or complicated flow. But it is possible to do it while flow. Yeah. So I kind of like it, and it's one of my favorite functionalities, I would say, to work on. So if there's a problem that can be done by flow, I would not hesitate to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I besides flow, I do like the Salesforce reports as well,
Mhm.
reporting function, and I'm warming up to its Einstein analytics, or what, or today it's been called Tableau CRM.
Right, right. So, what do you think about Einstein? Do you like it? Is it flexible? Easy to learn?
Yeah. I've just got its super batch, one of its super batch last week,
Oh yeah,
and it's
fantastic.
definitely easy to learn. Um, I mean, I'm not that an expert in BI systems, but I managed to pick it up and managed to compile the data and create a couple of reports on it, and it's a good looking reports as well. So if you're on a Salesforce platform, uh, you would definitely want to consider Tableau CRM or ISI Analytics as your BI tool instead of like Power BI or
Right, right.
other third party reporting tools, because they're so well integrated. Mm.
Right. I mean, the one of the cool features of Einstein I like is that, creating a data set, and even you can create the data set using Salesforce existing object, or you can, bring the data set from, say, AWS or, other platforms. So that's one of the cool feature
Yeah,
I like.
did
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of options that you can do with the data set. You can like have formulas on it. You can filter it, and you don't even need to do it in a data set. You can do it on this thing called recipe. So it
Right.
depends on what you want to do with the data and how you want to process it. So it gives you a lot of options.
Right. I just wanted to touch one more stuff on Einstein, right? I mean, people might be listening to us thinking, "Oh, Einstein seems very great." I mean, it's like a fancy AI tool, which is great. I mean, do you have to know any kind of machine learning algorithm to understand Einstein, or say someone with no background in data science can come and straight away work on it?
Okay, here's my opinion on that. First of all, again, caveat: I'm not an expert on machine learning, or I'm not a data scientist. There's a function in Einstein analytics called a discovery, where if you feed it enough data and you click a button, the Einstein analytics will give you insights, right?
Right.
And it will point out correlations. Um, but I think that you have to step back a little, and here's where an actual data scientist will come in handy, because when Einstein give you the correlation or the insights, um, you need someone there to tell you why it did that or how it did that, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, you just be trusting something that's provided by Einstein blindly without knowing how that correlation or uh, how that solution came about, right? Because underneath all that fancy AI is just essentially statistics or
Right.
statistical analysis. Yeah. So if you
Yeah.
have a proper expert there, okay, you run Einstein, and you will cut down your time. Yeah, you don't really essentially have to massage the data, or filter it through R, or Python or whatever. So Einstein will do it all for you. But when you interpret the data, I think it's better to have some expert who knows statistics saying, okay, this is how Einstein get. Why are you getting this correlation? It's because of this model that you're using, right? And then there's a lot of maths behind it.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, Einstein will spit out something, and you can either trust it or you don't. Right?
Yeah.
You have no idea why the data or why that result is provided.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I when I started working on Einstein, right, I personally felt that I should know a bit of machine learning, like supervised learning or unsupervised learning, just to get the context, right? I mean, I do understand for a functional consultant, it may not be necessary, but for if you are a technical consultant,
Mm,
I think it will be handy to know, right? I mean, so.
Should, of course.
Right. So one thing I just wanted to ask, since you said flows are your favorite, right? So, when you talk about Salesforce flows, right, you got a lot of, decision-making options there, like, you can use if else, loops. So do you think an understanding of fundamentals of programming will help, or, this is like a nice to have?
I don't think it's a nice to have. I think it's important that you understand the fundamentals of programming because of what you just said. Things like loops, if decision, and then assigning variables. Those those form the foundation of programming, and that's what you have to do in flows as well. So if you want to make the best out of flow, I would um, advise or recommend that perhaps you take a course on the internet on the fundamentals of programming. Yeah, I I think I mean Salesforce sort of sold flow as clicks, not coding.
Yeah.
And the impression is that, hey, anyone can do it. But the thing is, you have to understand or like programming as well, because if you're using if you're creating moderately complex flows, you're essentially programming, but but you're doing it with clicks and dragging the boxes around instead of remembering programming syntax. Yeah,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
it's essentially the same thing. I mean, you don't have to remember syntax, so that makes it easier. Uh, but on a fundamental level, you're doing the same thing as a programmer. Uh,
Right.
so so yeah, I mean you can get by, but at the end of the day, if you're an expert in flow, uh, all that lesson you still be absorbing it anyway, right? So might as well make it official.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree that. I came from a programming background, so when I started using flows, for me it was pretty straightforward. But yeah, the reason why I asked, right, like you said, you came from an accounting background, so so that's one of the reasons why I asked. All good. So, do you recommend people in New Zealand to become self-employed functional consultant? Do you think there are a lot of future or opportunities?
Oh yeah, definitely. For whatever reason, the Salesforce market in New Zealand is I don't know whether it is hyperbole, but I think it's exploding.
Yeah,
Right. HR recruiters are looking for Salesforce consultant, and especially for technical Salesforce technical developers as well. So those are in quite a demand.
yeah,
Yeah, and even if it's not, the thing about Salesforce is maybe it works both ways. That you can do the work remotely. So if you're a Salesforce consultant in New Zealand, and for some reason there's no market here, well, you can always apply for a remote job in Australia. So
yeah.
you can
Right, right,
it's
right.
actually flexible to serve two markets as well.
Yeah, that's right. You're right on that perspective. That being said, like I've seen a lot of big companies in New Zealand using Salesforce. Most of the government companies, they're
Mm,
like in my previous podcast when I was talking to Jimmy, I was telling him that the Ministry of Health, right?
mm,
They decide to use Salesforce for the vaccine, cloud,
mm.
not the vaccine cloud for the vaccine register. So, which is fantastic. It shows one thing, right? Salesforce is being trusted around the world. And yes, I do agree they are doing aggressive marketing, which is obviously, that's means they got better salespeople, which is fantastic. And so yeah, that's why I was asking that. If someone comes to you tomorrow and say, "Hey, Kinon, do you think that I should become a functional consultant on Salesforce space because I'm an accountant?" So obviously, I think you will say yes, right?
Uh, no, not automatically. I would say, well, it depends on your interests.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if you really like puzzle solving, if you have like clear critical thinking skills, and you don't mind figuring out why certain things aren't working, and mucking around in systems, then
right.
yeah, obviously, I wouldn't recommend it if you're going in just because Salesforce is the hottest uh, word right now.
Yeah,
Everyone's talking about it. But the thing is, Salesforce has an excellent learning website called Trailhead, right? So if you have interest in Salesforce, I would recommend that you sign up for Trailhead and then do at least 10 badges and see whether you like it, right? So if you don't, you can just drop out without, because it's free, right? If
hmm
you do, just continue and try to make a career out of it if possible. Mm.
right. That's a good advice. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it because yeah, it's always good to test it to see first if you're really interested. There might be case like you said, you came from an ERP background. And
Yep.
so, I worked on the same ERP system as you did. So when I moved from that ERP to Salesforce, it was like a mind-blowing experience for me because, like, that being said, I've used Salesforce before as well. But compared to that ERP system, the Salesforce was way flexible. It was more stable. And the development experience, especially on that, is amazing, mind-blowing. So, and that's the reason why I'm still in Salesforce space. Right. That's pretty much I wanted to ask today. Kin Onn, thank you so much for coming to my show. You you helped a lot of people, who's listening to us today, who might have questions around, functional consultancy. It's been a great talk. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. And I know it's Saturday, and so,
Thanks,
yeah,
Lucas. Yeah,
thank you. You have a great weekend.
thank you. You too. All right.
Bye.
Bye bye.